This is Sports Talk with Steve Jones, a Seven Mountains Media production. Check back daily, of course. And why wouldn't you? It's the morning. We're having fun here with the voice of Penn State football and men's basketball, featuring interviews with special guests. Now here's your host, Mr. Steve Jones.
We start out with your Yankees today, Kyle. Domingo Herman throws a perfect game. There will be two notes here. Number one, it's against the Oakland A's. Does it count?
50-50 on that one. It's a coin toss.
I'll say yes. All right. Number two, it is the fourth perfect game in the history of the Yankees.
Mm-hmm.
Don Larson, David Wells, David Cohn, and now Domingo Herman.
All with a D first name.
The previous three. Do you know this fact?
I'm wondering what you're going for here.
Every year that the Yankees have thrown a perfect game until now, they have won the World Series.
It's a good omen, if you ask me.
Now, Larson's was in the World Series.
Yeah, his was a bit different.
Yeah, his was in the World Series, but I think, Wells is 98 and Cohn was 99?
Yeah.
And that was when the Yankees were in their great run. This team won't make the World Series.
No. Wow. Hey, the way we were swinging the bats, not including Josh Donaldson, it's okay.
They're not good enough.
Yeah, no, we're not.
Okay.
I have accepted that.
But Herman, who's already been suspended this year, now throws the perfect game. It was a bit suspicious after the game that they wouldn't shake his hand; they would fist bump him because I think it would kind of like be like the guy in the replacements. Can't get.
All I know
I worry about your team, man.
I am worried about my team too. But for me, I think my favorite part of this entire thing was his last outing, I believe it was against the Mariners, gave up 10 runs in a few innings and was winless in his last few.
But this happens. Don Larson did not have a great season. Right? It's like, here, just take the ball in Game 5, go do something. Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, this happens a lot where guys are going along. Like, every once in a while you got a Sandy Koufax that throws a perfect game. Like, hey, it makes complete sense.
Yeah, King Felix was the most recent one in 2014, I believe. And that one, again, like he was one of the best pitchers in baseball, made sense. And you get Domingo Herman, who, respectfully, not the best pitcher.
No, but hey, all credit to him. Congratulations to him, and that's a great accomplishment because what's the 24th perfect game in the history of Major League Baseball.
And first in almost over a decade, I believe. Because Felix's was 2012, not 2014.
Yes, it was 11 years ago.
11 years since the last perfect game. People always talk about the toughest things to do in sports. I'd put that up there as one of the toughest things to do, just individually.
Well, because you have to get. Now, I don't know the genesis of how this played out last night at all. So I don't know if there were a great play or, I don't know.
There were a few okay ones, but none that were like what Matt Cain had when he was Giants.
Yeah. So I was at Fenway Park 1981 for a game. Ironically, I think it was with the Oakland A's. And the Red Sox won that night. And they kept posting on the scoreboard, Len Barker, perfect through 6. Len Barker, perfect through 7. Len Barker, perfect through 8. Len Barker threw a perfect game. Everybody in Fenway Park got up and gave the guy a standing ovation, even though he was nowhere near Fenway Park. We were all like, hey, great. I remember Carney Lansford was playing for the A's at the time, I think. He comes out of the dugout, looks like, goes, whoa, hey. It's like, okay. We're all like, hey, this is pretty cool. That's, the closest I ever saw anybody to throw in person throwing a no-hitter was Roger Moret. My grandfather and I went to the game. We were sitting on the third base side. The White Sox were playing the Red Sox. Moret was okay, wasn't great, but okay. And it used to be when I was a kid, my grandfather would take us to the games at Fenway. Now I was older, and I was treating him and taking him to the games. And this was just him and me. We're just together. And, he loves sports. I love sports. And the only hit the White Sox got was in the 7th inning. Dick Allen, infield hit. Doug Griffin went to his right, backhanded it, fielded it, and threw to first. And he clearly beat it out. It was the only hit Moret gave up. It was also, what was noteworthy about it was Jim Rice, the great Jim Rice, got his first major league hit in that game. It was a single off the wall. I'm talking he tattooed that sucker. But so I saw Jim Rice's first major league hit.
Not a bad one. Not a bad one there.
Not a bad game. But you know what made it special was with my grandfather.
Mm-hmm. Special memories you'll hold forever.
Yeah, that was the whole thing. It was the two of us together. So my mother, I don't want Steve driving your car. It's my mother. Right. And my grandfather's like, oh, yeah. So we pull out of the driveway. This is in Lexington. Pulls down to the end of the street to a gas station. He says, you're a better driver than I am. He says, I need you to drive the car. I said, okay, fine. So we drove in, went to the game, did the whole thing. Right, came back, went to the gas station, switched spots. Then he drove the rest of the way, like the last half mile from the gas station to his house. And I thought to myself, it's one thing for me to fear my mother. I said, it's another thing for her father to fear my mother. When my mother passed away, I did the eulogy, and I told that story, and everybody in the church laughed. So, oh, goodness gracious. All right. I was speaking in Hazleton last night. Your name came up several times. And it was mostly just law enforcement. Don't worry about it. Of course.
I mean, law enforcement currently is something happening in a lot of sports in forms.
Yes. But NIL, of course, came up. Now, the first speech I made of this run that I've been doing was down in South Carolina. And I would say 2/3 of the questions I received were about NIL. The last few I've gone to, I've been getting a question about NIL. And this is where there has to be, at some point, somebody needs to step up in a leadership position. And look, it can't be the individual schools. It's like Pat Kraft is a great leader. Well, Pat Kraft is not going to get up and he can't change NIL. Doesn't have the power to do it. But somebody in a leadership position, right? And it's obvious it's not going to be Charlie Baker, the head of the NCAA. The NCAA is taking a very hands-off stance on NIL, except when it comes to state laws, and we'll get to that in a second. But it has to be Greg Sankey, Tony Petitti, Jim Phillips, George Kliavkoff, Brett Yormark. Those are the 5 primary commissioners. If you want to include maybe a couple in the group of 5, you can do that. All right, but somebody in there has to step up and say, "Look, we have to do something about this." And to me, there are 2 choices here. One is the preferred NCAA choice, and that is with 50 states. Now, there aren't 50 different laws, but I would say there's a good chance that there's anywhere from 5 to 8 different laws that are spread out over 50 states. Most of them have a certain pattern of law, and others have variations to it. But you still have different laws. So that's why the NCAA is asking for the federal government to put together guidelines to unify the law so it commands over all 50 states. So let's take Texas, for example. Texas, it's a law that goes into effect on Saturday. And Arkansas and Oklahoma also have the same state law. So see what I'm saying? 5 to 8 states have, it's not 50 different states, 50 different laws. But Arkansas and Oklahoma are the same thing. You cannot, as I explained last night to the group in Hazleton, it's not a tax deductible contribution to NIL. So what Texas wants to do, along with Texas A&M, is they want to incentivize. All right? So, Kyle, you make a donation to NIL, we'll get you points, right? Which is important, for seats, parking, things like that. We can get you points. We can upgrade your seats. We can give you bowl incentives. Some incentive along the way to make your contribution feel like you got something out of it than just giving money, because you don't have the ability to write it off on your taxes. And the NCAA has stepped in and said, hey, whoa, that's a violation. Right? You can't do that. Ross Bjork, who is the athletic director at Texas A&M, said, yeah, we hear you. Guess what? We're going to follow the state law. If the state allows us to do it, we're going to do it. And again, the NCAA is in this weakened fetal position. And what are you going to do? Take them to court? Here's one for you. I've looked at your record. You're 0 for life in court. The NCAA does not fare well. I mean, they lose every case. So why should anybody fear going to court with them, other than the fact that you have to then pay money to get there? I mean, that it's going to cost you money to go. So they would like to see the NCAA a federal government solution. There is a segment out there that will say, as a segment, that the federal government fouls up everything. Okay.
Fair. Okay. Fair statement.
All right. I'm just saying there's a segment that will say that. So what's the solution if it's not the federal government and say the overriding opinion is, now we don't want the government involved? Okay. Say that happens to be the sentiment. Do you then negotiate with a unionized effort? Maybe it's loosely unionized, saying, here's the TV dollars. We're going to put together a slice for you, and you can spread it out however you want. Now, in the SEC and the Big Ten, could be a pretty decent slice. ACC, Big 12, obviously a smaller slice. Pac-12, who knows? Nobody knows yet. Do you do that? Remember, if there is an organized group of players, it's not a perfect solution, because who's to say that a new TV deal is struck in 2028, 29, which is probably the next time the Big Ten's going to be, putting out a new TV deal. And they say, well, we agreed to this, but wait a minute, what's going on here? You got a much bigger number. We're going on strike. Because, again, you're organized, right? There'll be a segment that says we don't want them to be employees of the university. Okay. So how do you get around that? So there's a lot of ground. And in this ground, can you find enough common ground to make this happen? This model is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And you already have a TV gap between the SEC, the Big Ten, and everybody else. Your godforsaken programs in the ACC.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know what the NIL structure is at Syracuse. I don't know.
It's something.
It's probably more organized toward the basketball side.
Yes.
But that's going to be the problem. And you're going to have a series of schools out there that have been ultra aggressive in NIL. They're way ahead of the game, and it's probably already showing in recruiting now. But there needs to be some structure. The model is not sustainable. I will give them credit. They are working on shortening the portal time. They're looking at cutting it in half in terms of the times that you can put your name into the portal. They're looking at cutting it in half. So they're doing a better job of putting some parameters around that and freedom of movement, because there is exponentially more freedom of movement in college sports than there is in professional sports. And why is that? There's a collective bargaining agreement in professional sports, and contracts are honored. Okay? Even though these are, you get letters of intent and they're kind of like contracts, they aren't. It's not like you're sitting there signing I'm signing a 4 or 5 year deal to, play basketball, football, whatever at State U. So they have to find something that allows the college model to be sustainable while also adhering to what was written in the 9-0 Alston opinion, that you need to do something about this. Because, let's be realistic, right? There's 110,000 people showing up at Beaver Stadium. And the front of the jersey means everything to Penn State fans. Just like I think the front of the jersey means everything to Michigan fans, it means everything to Ohio State fans, USC, Texas, Alabama, the front, because the players do change. But, gee, it sure is exciting when Saquon Barkley's out there. And it sure is exciting when Micah Parsons is out there. And when they're out there selling jerseys, for example, and this is how far the NCAA went. Well, you can't sell a 26 jersey. Can't sell an 11 jersey. Because they didn't want the players to get. So you can sell a 1. This is all changed, obviously. But you used to be able to sell 1, or in the case of Northwestern, they could sell 51, which was Pat Fitzgerald's number, and it's retired.
Yeah.
This is how the lengths that they went to as they continue to stick their head in the sand over the issue. There are fans that, and I understand this, because remember we talked about the other day expansion teams. And even though they may be in an area 20, 25 years, the longtime fans still come to root for the team they're playing against. Okay? Because, and it gets passed on. Grandfather, right? To father, to son, to your son, or daughter, right? Okay? And it gets passed on, and so the fan lineage continues. Well, it's the same thing with this. Now, long-standing college football fans are looking around saying, oh, wait a minute, isn't this about scholarships, education, winning? Right? Isn't it about that? It's not about money. And it takes a lot for them to get used to the change in the model. And as I tell everybody when I go to speak, I said, look, we are in an adaptive time period in intercollegiate athletics. I said, does it need parameters? Yes. I said, does it need structure? Yes. Should structure happen sooner rather than later? Yes, because this current model that everybody's adapting to is unsustainable. It's just not sustainable. Long-term, elements of the model are sustainable, including the ability of a student athlete to capitalize on their name, image, and likeness. Okay? But how do you go through this current time frame without turning off that long-time fan? Like I said, you go to a Tampa Bay Rays game and they're playing the New York Yankees, 75% of the crowd are Yankee fans because people have moved down there. That was their team. And, yeah, we'll root for the Rays other times of the year, but not now. Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with NIL. Longtime college football fans, okay, the previous model is the model that they've been attached to. And as I explained to them, I said, you have 2 options with this as we adapt. I said, and yes, it needs structure, and it needs structure sooner rather than later, because the model as it is set up at this hour is not sustainable. I said, but you either adapt or lose. Those are your 2 options. If and as I explained to very nice gentleman who asked the question last night. And it's always the same. What's your opinion on NIL? There's not like one of those really long questions. And I said, look, I said, that's the bottom line to it. You either adapt or you lose. I said, you can't be a fan, in my opinion, that sits there and says, I'm not giving a dime, and nobody should give a dime to NIL. And then the team goes 4-8, and I want the coach fired. Well, wait a minute. Okay, everybody else is doing this. You said no. I said, what? I said, you've got to be able to look and say, okay, we need to adapt. How do we adapt? I said, and that's where NIL comes in. You either adapt or you lose. And that's the way it is right now. Does it need structure? Yes. Does it need parameters? Yes. Does it need leadership? Yes. And it needs it sooner rather than later. I mean, if it keeps going like this 3, 4, 5 years from now, because remember, when you're doing NIL, it's not a one-time contribution. You have to keep contributing to it.
Can't just one-off it.
Right. And that's going to be a big issue, and it's a huge issue now, and it's going to be a big issue moving forward. And they need to get some sort of structure. That's one thing about professional sports. You can talk about the money it's made in professional sports, but there is
system.
But there is structure. There is structure. Domingo Herman throws perfect game. Baseball sticks to hand. What does that mean? I'm just kidding.
It's okay. Keep saying it.
Well, to his credit, he earned it.
He did earn it. And there's all these rules in so many sports surrounding, I guess, the new ones for baseball with sticky stuff. Of course, the past few years has been crazy. But a new recent rule that has taken place and has been enforced heavily, I think recently, especially in the NFL, has been the gambling.
Yes.
That has been something we saw it a year or two ago with Calvin Ridley, and now it is rearing its, not ugly head, but it's rearing its head big time in the NFL.
Isaiah Rodgers, we know, is going to be one of the guys suspended from the Indianapolis Colts. And look, and he's acknowledged on social media, he says, this is not a guy that's out there denying it. But let's go through what the rules are. And believe me, this is posted in every locker room, every team facility, every Major League Baseball clubhouse. Right? Now, they should be posted on campuses. Now, I don't know. The locker rooms I've been in, I haven't seen it. But let's go through very quickly. And I know we've done this before, but let's do this for all the sports because I think we've only done it with the NFL. The NHL is very simple. You are not allowed to bet on National Hockey League games. Right?
Easy.
Anything. In other words, whether it's a prop bet or, hey, we're going to bet on the All-Star game, whatever. But anything else you are allowed to gamble on if you're an NHL player. You just cannot bet on any way, shape, or form on an NHL game. And you can place the bet. If you're sitting in the locker room and you're on your phone, you want to place a bet on an NBA game, you can. You want to bet on a college football game as you're on the road at the hotel, you can. That's the NHL rule. Major League Baseball, same rule. You cannot bet on any Major League Baseball game. Zero, zip, zilch. Simple, plain. Anything else you can bet on. And if you want to sit in the clubhouse and bet there, if you're on the road in the hotel, you can do that on your phone, whatever. Okay. The NBA. The NBA allows you to gamble on anything, and it doesn't matter where you do it. If you're in the locker room, if you happen to be at the team hotel, fine. But you're not allowed to bet on anything that is associated with the NBA. So you cannot bet on an NBA game, a G League game, a WNBA game, an NBA Africa game, right? You're not allowed to bet on anything that is associated in any way, shape, or form with the NBA. Any property, any property that they own, you can't place a bet on. Right? So you can't just sit there and go, hey, I'm going to make a prop bet on the G League game. Nope, NBA owns the G League. You're done. NBA Africa, you don't think, nobody thinks about it, but it's there. And guess what? You cannot place a bet on that.
And you know what? I'm okay with those 3 sports. I'm okay with those rules of you can't bet on our stuff, basically. That's easy. Pretty straightforward.
Now, the NFL, okay, has 6 rules. But they are very much like black and white.
Mm-hmm.
There's no gray area on these rules. Number 1, don't bet on the NFL.
Easy.
Okay. Number 2, okay, now this is where it does get, this one here does have a gray area to it, all right? Don't gamble at your team facility or while traveling for a road game or staying at the team hotel. You're asking why did, for example, 2 guys for the Lions, including Jamison Williams, got 6-game suspensions because they placed the bet at the team facility, and it wasn't on the NFL. Well, why don't you just go outside? Well, here's the problem. If you go outside, you might still be on the team's Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
See, there's the gray area with that one. Right?
You'd be in the parking lot and it would technically count.
Right. You're still inside the team facility because you still have access to the Wi-Fi. Like, well, I left the building. Yeah, but you were in. Okay, but
you're on the property somewhere.
You're on the property, and guess what? Your phone probably automatically goes to the team Wi-Fi the second it gets there. All right. Don't have someone bet for you.
Seems straightforward.
Don't share any team inside information.
Straightforward again.
Jerry Valeri has a sore throat, may not be able to do the show today. Really?
Steve Jones has a hurt left pinky, might not be available for tonight's game. We'll see on the broadcast later today.
Right pinky. Mm-hmm. Old football injury.
Yeah. Old football injury, catching a hot dog, one or the other.
Right. Don't enter a sports book during the NFL playing season. Now, most people don't want to go to a sports book anyway. Right? Every time I've been at a casino, because we've stayed at casinos for basketball tournaments, Mohegan Sun, Orleans, places like that. I've never gone to. I've hardly seen anybody over at Sportsbook.
I have a question on this one.
Yeah,
and people normally don't go to sports books. They usually do it like online. If you're at a casino in Vegas, there's a section of it that's the sports book, and I've placed bets and stuff like that. But it's not really a sports book. Some sporting facilities now, or at least the arenas, are getting their sports books put in place. Yes. So one part of the arena has the sports book in it, but sometimes, as was seen, I believe it was the Clippers. It was something related to the LA Clippers. I forget where they were playing, that their locker room, the best way to get to the court was through like a club.
Yeah.
And that club in the NBA had a sports book, I believe, in it.
Yeah, but it's probably glassed off and you can't get in. The entrance is probably on the opposite side.
But that's, I think, a gray area, or it would be if it's an NFL. Because let's say a player walks through and technically walks into a sports book and has to walk through it.
Technically, you're not walking through it because of because
the red line is the small box rather than the big box.
Well, in other words, no, it's usually those things are always glassed off.
Mm-hmm.
So the fans, there's no contact with you and the fans, and you're technically not in it. You're actually in the hallway.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not like it's a hallway where all the doors are open. There aren't any doors.
Mm-hmm.
All right? There are no doors because they don't. Let's for example, I've gone through the walkway of several arenas to get in, that are combo hockey, basketball arenas. And then I'll give you Pittsburgh's like that, where the people are in the lounge and, hey, the Penguins are coming out now. But they can't. There's no way they can get to them.
Yeah.
Because they don't want the ability of the fan and some knuckleheads having a few drinks to go through the door and all of a sudden he's on the ice. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. I remember back in the day, I went to a Orlando Magic game at the Amway Center. And I remember high-fiving Glenn Big Baby Davis and Dwight Howard at the time still, as they walked out from the locker room right there, and there's fans high-fiving them as they walk out, and right next door to that is a sports book.
Right.
And it's one of those weird things where
Great America Ballpark has a sports book. How do we know that? Because of the Alabama baseball story.
Mm-hmm.
The bet was made at Great America Ballpark, and the Reds were on the road at the time. They ironically were at Oakland. All right.
What a place.
But that's where the bet was made. So you have this, and kiosks are being set up
Everywhere
to do this. So look, it's all around you. But in England, back to your soccer references, it's been like this for a long time, where they've had kiosks set up at Arsenal, Tottenham, Chelsea, Liverpool,
everywhere.
Man City, Man U, they've got them all, okay? And those kiosks have been there for a long time. Who's the major sports book there? It begins with an L.
There's a bunch of them.
Yeah, but there's a major one that's above all in England. I think it begins with an L, I want to say.
You've got Betway, Unibet. There's basically whatever you could think of.
There's more than ever now.
Yeah, William Hill. A lot of them sponsor soccer teams as well, or are part of them.
Right.
Like soccer hasn't really had betting issues. There's been one recently.
No, that's exactly right. And that's been my point about it. That's a really good point. Because I've made that point too. That, well, in England, soccer has this, and they had no issue with it. And I think this is their initial stage of trying to clean up any issue. Finally, you can't play fantasy football. That's number 6. You can't play fantasy football. Oh, darn. We're playing the Ravens today, and I've got their defense.
I think the rule at least used to be you can't play it for money. Yeah. I think it was part of the old rule because remember, I think it was a few years ago, someone was joking like how he had someone else on his fantasy team that he was playing against, and he jokingly was like, I really want them to go off today, but I also need my job to go well and to make money. So I'm going to go with my job over this free thing I'm doing for fun with my friends.
Yeah. Well, now let's get to the college rule. Now you want to talk about restrictive?
Let's hear it.
In the NCAA, you are not allowed to place a wager on any sport that the NCAA sponsors at any level. So if you are a gymnast and there is a high school football game, I don't know if high school football games are on the book or not, you can't place the bet because the NCAA sponsors football. If you are a baseball player, a collegiate baseball player, softball player, either one, and you want to place a bet on the Super Bowl, a prop bet, can't do it. The NCAA sponsors football. I want to make a bet in the NBA Finals, can't do it. G League, can't do it because basketball is a sponsored sport.
Mm-hmm.
So what can they do?
Nothing.
Horse racing, auto racing.
Badminton? Or is that sponsored?
I don't think there's a badminton champion.
So bet on badminton, guys.
All right. Cricket.
Darts.
Cricket. Can't bet on the World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
Can't do any of that. So it doesn't matter what level it is. As an NCAA student athlete, you are not allowed to place a bet on any sport that the NCAA sponsors. Okay, so let's take Olympic beach volleyball. Hey, I'm going to make can't because believe it or not, the NCAA sponsors beach volleyball. Now, obviously, we don't have it, but I believe USC and UCLA both have it.
Yeah.
For example, sailing.
Can't bet.
Can't bet on sailing. Hey, they're going to have, okay. Olympic rowing. Okay. I'm going to place a bet on Olympic. No, there's actually rowing championships in the NCAA. Ohio State is a rowing team.
Syracuse is a rowing team.
Yeah, but they sunk.
But the NCAA's, the restrictions they have, that is the most extreme.
Strict as strict gets about it.
You can't touch any sport, essentially.
Any level of any, you can't touch it. And it doesn't matter. Well, I'm a softball player. Why can't I bet on, I'm not going to bet on a college football game, okay? I'm going to bet on a USFL game.
Mm-hmm.
No. Football is a sponsored sport, and they're the strictest of all.
And I don't get why. I would understand if you're like, you can't bet on any NCAA sport, but you can bet on professionals. I would understand that. That'd be reasonable, at least. Right. Like, you can't bet on college stuff because your friends go to colleges everywhere and you might have a connection here, there, or wherever. So no college stuff. Logical.
Right.
But you can't bet on the World Cup final. I don't think Penn State players here are friends with Lionel Messi. I'm fairly confident. I might be wrong there, but I don't get that. They're tight. They're real close. You best friends with Ronaldo? Is that what's happening here?
It's always great to see him at football practice.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, how you been? Mm-hmm. Good. Look, you're just not allowed to do it. Simple as that. And the NCAA has the strictest rules on it. Somebody said, well, they're talking about, I'm sure at some point it's going to happen, but putting a casino in at the Nittany Mall. I think, is it Bally's?
Bally's, I believe.
Yeah. And somebody, with all these college kids, what could go wrong? And all these student athletes. Hey, first of all, it's like, guys, we all have this now.
Yeah. You can go on a phone easier to bet than you can at a sports book.
I mean, do you think they're going to drive out in the car and go to the sports book when they can just sit there and just do this? Come on.
I'll open up DraftKings right now. I'll place a bet immediately.
Yeah. And that's, if you're participating in it, and what strikes me is that it's the any level thing. So, you can't sit there. Hey, we're all sitting in the locker room. Hey, I'm a big Steelers fan. Hey, I'm a big Eagles fan. They're playing each other. Hey, boom. You can't do it. Even though it's not a college game, you're not allowed to place a bet on any kind of game that the NCAA sponsors. Anything. And it doesn't matter what level it is, whether it's high school, college, professional, semi-pro, Olympic.
And I want to ask you a question on the rules and restrictions, not just in the NCAA, but in all these leagues and all these things. And as you said, sports books are getting put in place in a lot of stadiums and in a lot of locations near college campuses, because there is a lot of college kids that do sports betting or do sports betting content. I went to Syracuse. One of my best friends, who I'm seeing in a week, he made a whole channel on TikTok that was about betting. And he had 10,000 followers, and he's friends with people, and he does curling at the club level. And all these kids in college do sports betting.
I know they do. I always will talk to my class about this. I'll let you ask your question first.
So my question is, with all of these changes coming and sports books being so much more involved in the collegiate and the professional level, where now you are getting sports books in stadiums, what's the future of these rules like this in every sport, but especially the NCAA, NFL, where they are restrictive to basically everywhere in general, not just their own sport?
They are fighting right now, and to the credit of Premier League, Champions League, and so forth, they obviously seem to understand what the rules are. The reason these rules exist are to maintain the integrity of what you're watching. Right? So in order to have the privilege to play, you have to make sure that you aren't like the fans and can't participate in gambling on it, because that right has gone away because the integrity of what you're doing cannot be compromised or give anyone the impression that it has been compromised. Often we hear about stories about, but he bet on his team to win. And Paul Hornung, it is alleged, bet on the Packers to win. Alex Karras, it is alleged, bet on the Lions to win.
Calvin Ridley bet on the Falcons to win. Right,
and wasn't even with the team at the time. He was on the roster, but was on the injured list. Right. Pete Rose bet on the Reds to win. Well, what's wrong with that? Well, I've talked about the Rose case. You can mismanage your team and potentially cause injury harm because you need to win that day. I pitched Kyle 3 straight days. I need to give him this day off because it's important for me not just to manage the situation, the game, but I have to manage the season. and I have to manage Kyle. So in part, that's my job. Kyle will be able to pitch in August in all likelihood if I can give him today off. Wait, I've got money on today's game, right? I need a 5-out save. Well, he doesn't usually give me 5-out saves. I usually just pitch him in the 9th inning. No, I got to win today. So now I extend you extra batters to get the save so I can win my bet, right? And then something happens to you, probably maybe in the game or just through even arm fatigue, whatever like that, because I pitched you 4 straight games. I pitched you more innings than you should be pitching. Right? There's a lot of factors that go into it, and that is the problem with it. I tell my class all the time, I say, look, you don't have to participate in this. I said, but we're going to talk about gambling. How many of you place bets? And I'll get 2/3 of the class. And if they don't care, they'll tell you right, oh, yeah. 2/3 of the hands go up. Now, number one, it's legal.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I said, look, and I tell them the same thing every time. I don't care what you do with your money. It's your money. It's fine. If it gives you a greater thrill, fabulous. I said, but my strong recommendation is do not place a wager on a game you're covering. And the reason I said is simple, is it will completely skew your opinion based on the outcome. It's obvious what your emotions are when you lose the bet. You're mad. There's fault, right? Quarterback played a lousy game. He screwed me. Coach called a terrible game. He screwed me, right? The defense was terrible. The coordinator's awful because it becomes personal. Now you flip it to the other side. Well, you won. So what's the problem with that? Well, now, part of it is to sit there and do an honest analysis of what went on. Hey, they won today, but they need to be better here. They won today, but they need to be better there. You may not get that kind of analysis because, hey, we won today. Everything's good with the world. We're good. So it works both ways. And I said, that's only my advice. So you can do whatever you want. I said, but don't place a wager on a game you are covering. And I said, whatever you want to do with your money is your money. I said, it's legal. And there are more states added. North Carolina just added it. I think one other state added. I think we're up to like 33 states plus D.C. right now that have it. Eventually we'll get to 50. And it's going to take some states longer than others. But I continue to look at Premier League soccer. For some reason, they don't seem to run into these problems. And maybe the reason we're running into these problems right now is because it is new here.
Yeah. The only case I can remember, at least, in terms of an issue with someone betting is recent in the Premier League with Ivan Toney, a player for Brentford, a good team in the Prem, that he was handed an 8-month ban because he bet on his own club at some point to lose matches. He has a gambling addiction. It was diagnosed as such. And so he was handed a 15-month ban, but then it was dropped down to 8 after taking account his plea of gambling addiction, and he's going to be in addiction therapy for the next 8 months. So that is the only one I can recall in soccer of being an issue. And again, like they have betting like logos everywhere on all of their kits and everything. Teams like Bet365 was a major thing, and they literally sponsored a team stadium. Yes. It's fairly common now for this to happen. And then you get like the Premier League themselves have their own fantasy system. Sure, FPL. It is their own Premier League made fantasy football league, basically. And all these players are participating in it. There's a player who does YouTube currently, Ben Foster, plays for Wrexham FC. And he, every week on his vlog before matches, would be like, this is my FPL squad for the week. No issues. No one cares.
No. But they have structure to it.
Yeah, and no one breaks that structure.
Right. Well, but the structure is a little more liberalized, which helps. For example, Wimbledon, is about to happen. Mm-hmm. The Open Championship's about to happen. There'll be bets all over the place on that. And you never hear about tennis players and golfers and having a problem over there with what's going on. You don't. So I think this is new in this country. Thus, you have, and it's not a question of not knowing what the rules are. The rules are pretty good. Mm-hmm. The NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball. I mean, the only part with the NFL part, I'm like,
the facility one.
It's the facility part. I sit there and go, what does it matter? What does it matter?
Mm-hmm.
You're sitting in the locker room and you're an NFL player and you want to place a wager on the Lakers-Mavericks game. What does it matter if you're sitting here or you're sitting over at the 7-Eleven? Mm-hmm. What's the difference? I mean, I don't quite see like what you're doing. That's like, oh, okay. You're still placing the wager.
Mm-hmm.
What, because you're sitting in front of your locker?
Because I'm sitting in my car in the parking lot. That's an issue. Like, I mean, that's what I don't get.
That's the only part of their policy I don't get. Is what does location make a difference when you're not even, you're not allowed to bet on the National Football League? Okay, fine, right? But but you can't sit in the locker room and place a wager on the Kansas City Royals Colorado Rockies game?
Or let's say you're traveling. You're in London for the NFL games there.
It doesn't matter.
You go to an Arsenal game.
Right.
You can't bet at the Arsenal Stadium because you're technically traveling with the team, even though it's got nothing to do with anything.
Right, exactly.
Crazy.
See, that's the one part of the NFL policy where I sit there and go, wait a minute, I don't get it. You can't do it while traveling with the team. You can't do it at the team hotel. You can't do it at the facility because you're trying to keep that line. Please, stop with the line. There's already enough lines.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, here's one. You can't bet on the National Football League. We're done. Mm-hmm. That's the only one you need to know. You can't do fantasy football. That's fine. That's okay.
Fair.
Okay. Can't give out inside info. Makes complete sense. You don't want to be giving out.
I don't think you want to do that anyway.
Anyway, that usually leads to getting cut.
Mm-hmm. That leads to getting cut or just thrown off your team immediately and just gone.
Right.
Never return to the NFL.
So all those are common sense rules. Mm-hmm. The only one of the NFL rules not a common sense rule is where it happens. Right. Okay. I'm going to put down a wager that Connor Bedard's going to be the first overall pick in the NHL entry draft, and I put that down in February.
And you know what? You know where I can't do it? I can't do it at my team's stadium where there's a sports book.
Right. Yeah, they have a sports book there. Oh, and by the way, the sports book also is one of the team sponsors. What?
The Dallas Cowboys broadcast brought to you by FanDuel.
Right. Well, being PointsBet already has a business alliance with the University of Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's 2023. I said there, okay, I get it. It's fine. Doesn't bother me. I mean, do you know how many arenas I sit in or stadiums I sit in where I see, either a sign for the casino or on the ribbon board something about the casino or whatever. And you become completely dulled to it. Right? They've got the money. I'll give you one quick one, though.
Ooh.
Back down in 2001, I'm at the NCAA tournament in New Orleans. And we're staying at the Marriott downtown on Canal Street. And just down the street a little bit is a Harrah's Casino. Okay. So I picked up the paper, the New Orleans Time-Picayune. Harrah's announces Chapter 11 for the New Orleans Casino. I remember I said to Dave Baker, how is that possible? And so I asked somebody in New Orleans about that, and they said, well, a lot of people have been going over to Biloxi, to Mississippi for years, and, Biloxi's right on the coast.
Mm-hmm.
He said, here we have Bourbon Street, Mardi Gras, things like that. He says, it's not really about it. People don't think about it as much. I thought, a casino filed Chapter 11. And this was 2001, where there weren't a lot of casinos around at the time.
And where to place a bet, you had to go to one of those.
Yeah, you couldn't do it. There's no way you could make a bet on your phone.
Or you had to know a Mike Francesa in Uncut Gems. You had to know someone somewhere.
It's an offshore account. Okay. I always loved that. People for years betting on offshore. Okay. But they filed Chapter 11. I said to Dave, I thought that would be impossible. Now, I would think it's possible because with phones and computers and things like that, you don't have to physically go there.
You can be wherever you want to be, on your iPad, on your phone, on the toilet. Doesn't matter. You can do it.
And based on that last visual, we'll call it a day.
And of course, thanks for tuning in to Sports Talk with Steve Jones, a Seven Mountains Media production. Check back daily for all the latest sports news and analysis with the voice of Penn State football.